everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while now since my last video. I'm hoping that you have been practicing the skills that we have talked through in the past few videos. If not, there's no consequence. Alright, for those that are new to this channel, I'm Chelsea. I'm an internationally certified wine professional. And in this channel, I'll be sharing with you some of the wine knowledge that I've gained over the years. At any point of time, if you like this video, do hit the like button. And do subscribe to this channel if you like more videos like this one. Alright, so today we're gonna talk about Bordeaux. And my focus is gonna be on the Reds. I've been making a few videos now. I think that I must cover Bordeaux. It's such an important region in France, and actually I think it's the center of wine production in the world. So how can I not make a video on Bordeaux? Bordeaux has the greatest number of large wine estates in France, and it produces 25% of the AOC wine production in France. And Bordeaux is so famous that I think that people that do not drink a lot of wines know about Bordeaux. It explains how important it is that we have to cover this region in this channel. Alright, so fun fact, the name Bordeaux, if you break down the name in French, it is au bord de l'eau. What it means is au bord means it's on the side, it's on the edge, and the word eau is water in French. So au bord de l'eau means beside the water. The direct English translation of Bordeaux means beside the river or at the edge of water. So basically, the name actually gives you some hints about the geographic location of Bordeaux. Bordeaux is located at the coast of Atlantic Ocean. And there's a Gironde estuary that stretches along Bordeaux, and then it divides into Garonne and Dordogne rivers. The closeness to the ocean and the rivers brings moderate maritime climate to Bordeaux. Maritime climate means that rain is a thing in the region. So the name Bordeaux pretty much describes the rivers and the oceans surrounding the region. So besides the river, there's another geographic characteristics about Bordeaux. It's called Les Landes Forest. It is the largest man-made forest in Europe. We were just talking about the rain stuff. Thanks to the forest, it protects the vineyards from the Atlantic storm. Bordeaux is a red grape dominant wine producing region. 90% of the wines are red. And there's three main grapes here. And most of the wines are blends. Although you may see some of the wine producers make 100% Merlot on the right bank. The three main grapes are Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. Now, Cabernet Sauvignon is more tannic, Merlot is softer, rounder, so it naturally balances out the more tannic Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Franc is more used on the right bank. It gives acidity and spiciness to the wine. These three grapes are blended at different ratios depending on wine producers. Blending requires a lot of experience and tasting. Bordeaux pretty much sets the benchmark for the world in terms of blending. Now, we were just talking about that the weather in Bordeaux is actually pretty rainy, and so it is actually also not a super reliable hot climate. It is pretty much the northern limits of where Cabernet Sauvignon can be ripened. Now, Bordeaux doesn't have the advantage of the New World countries like Australia, South Africa, and California, where climate is more reliable, and it can still make such fantastic wine because of the terroir. It brings me to the terroir of Bordeaux. It is a rainy, not very reliable hot region, but luckily the soil on the left bank is mostly gravel, and gravel is kind of like a stone type soil. The sun warms up the stones, the warmth radiates back to the grapes, and gravel also drains very well, so it explains why even at the northern limits the growing of Cabernet Sauvignon is still possible in Bordeaux. And with all the rain and stuff that we were talking about, it explains also why vintage matters so much. You know, people are talking about 2014, 2015, 2016 are good vintages. The reason is because the weather matters so much. It cannot be too hot, it cannot be too cold, and especially it cannot be too rainy at the point of harvesting, because then it will just dilute the grapes or it will result in rotting and stuff like that. So that's why people do talk a lot about vintages for Bordeaux. And one thing that could be interesting for you to know is that, you know, with all the challenges, the climate and all the stuff, everything seems to work perfectly. The right grapes matching to the right soil, and these come from years and years of experiments. And Bordeaux has such a long winemaking history dating back to the Roman Empire, which is 2,000 years ago. So what we are seeing now is really the results of the experiments that people have been making for the past many years in Bordeaux. So as we talk about Bordeaux Reds, I do want to focus on two main sub-regions. They are the left bank and the right bank. So let's start with the left bank. So left bank consists of Médoc and Grave. Grave is actually gravel in French, and again it gives you hints of what the soil is like. And pretty much gravel is dominant on the left bank, and so the whole left bank is full of gravel, and it's so important, like what we say, it drains out the soil, so even when it's rainy, it doesn't drown the vineyard, which is very important in the maritime climate. It's close to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, Haut-Médoc is where you find most of the most famous appellations and chateau name in Bordeaux. And it's also what many people have in mind when it comes to Bordeaux. You know, when you think about Bordeaux, it's pretty much we think about Haut-Médoc, the premium wines. This impression that we have in Bordeaux is based on a very small percentage of the production in Bordeaux, and mainly they are of interest of wine enthusiasts and wine collectors. This is also where you find most of the wines there are for auctions. The wines that are put in auction a century ago, almost like the whole Bordeaux reputation is based on that. That is the basis of Bordeaux. Now, the left bank is mainly Cabernet Sauvignon dominant, blend with Merlot. So I just want to talk a bit about why Bordeaux becomes so famous, why we have such a strong embedded idea of Bordeaux based on such a small premium production. And that's dated back to 1855. It is the year when Napoleon hosted a universal exhibition. The idea of the exhibition is to showcase the technology and the culture of France at that time. And Napoleon thought that wine was a good representation of French culture. He asked the commercial brokers to put together a list of properties as a reference guide for price setting or for tax purpose, and the brokers list out 58 properties. And that document was not meant to be a permanent document. It certainly was not meant to be a classification of the wines at that time. It just simply wanted to list down the prices at the point of time for the properties. 58 of them went in, and this became the famous 1855 classification, where we see 58 chateau names listed down in the list. And this classification, because of commercial purpose, got broken down to 5 levels. First grown, second grown, third grown, fourth grown, fifth grown, first grown being the best property. You can find the 58 chateau names online. Some of the more famous ones are the Premier Cru, and definitely a lot of people know about the Premier Cru, which is first grown, you know, like Haut-Brion, Lafite Rothschild, Margaux, Latour, and Mouton Rothschild. And the problem with this classification is that it doesn't include the right bank, and it doesn't include any dry whites. So it's not really inclusive of the wine production in Bordeaux, and somehow this list became a permanent classification, and it does have a lot of influence in the pricing. As this document was set quite some time ago, you can't really say the second growth is definitely better than the third growth and all that kind of stuff, but it does give you a pretty good idea of what the premium wine estates are in Bordeaux. And at the end of the day, the idea that we have of Bordeaux and the reputation of Bordeaux is built based upon this list, the 1855 classification. Alright, so then we move on to the right bank. The right bank is actually more Merlot based. It usually blends with Cabernet Franc. Now the soil is different from the left bank. Just now we talked about gravel, Grave. You know, gravel is the thing because it's rainy. Now Merlot is a different grade. It's not Cabernet Sauvignon, and it works well with clay and limestone. We also call it like the colder soil. Merlot in the blend give a silky texture, and also because it's less tannic, it's usually ready to drink at a younger age compared to the left bank. And two of the bigger AOCs in the right bank is Pomerol. Now Pomerol has a very prestigious wine estate called Petrus, but otherwise Pomerol is quite a small appellation, so you may actually be able to find some good value Bordeaux Reds there, because the left bank tends to make the reputation of each vintage in Bordeaux, so that's where you can actually find some bargains. And then we have Saint-Emilion. So Saint-Emilion is on the right bank, like we just discussed just now. The 1855 classification classification miss out the whole right bank and there's no dry whites. So they've decided to make a classification of their own in 1955, so really 1 century later. It's called the Saint-Emilion classification. Now the idea is that the classification can be revised every 10 years and is purposely designed this way because the lesser estates can make improvement and they can actually gain a higher classification if they've made improvement. So it's different from the 1855 classification, which is fixed. The 1955 is something that can be reviewed and revised every 10 years. And in this classification, there are 3 levels. There's Premier Grand Cru Classé A. There are 4 estates there. There's Premier Grand Cru Classé B, and there's Grand Cru Classic. Now 2012 was the last classification and we were just saying like it can be revised every 10 years. So then 2022, this year, is the year that they will review the classification again. Cheval Blanc and Ozon, the 2 premium wine estates that were listed in the Premier Grand Cru Classic A, have decided to opt out in the 2022 classification. So yeah, so we'll see how it goes with this 1955 classification going forward. So we have talked a lot about the history, the grapes, the soil, the climate, classification, and I do understand that it's a lot to take in and it is impossible to remember everything, and especially the chateau names. And I just want to give you some tips in getting a bottle of bottled wine in an everyday scenario without complicating things too much. With that, I'd like you to know some of the labeling terms for bottled wines, so it helps you make some of the wine purchase decision when you are at the wine store. Okay, so the first labeling term that I like to talk about is the label Grand Vin. This bottle here, it actually says Grand Vin. I'm not sure if you can see it here. Grand Vin basically means top wine. It basically means it is the top wine that a wine estates produce, or they think it is the best wine that they produce. It is more like a marketing term. There's no regulation on it, so I wouldn't take it so much as a reference. There are other labeling terms. Now I want to start from the left bank. So left bank, you can look for the word Cru Bourgeois. Now, so there's some updates in 2020. It used to be reviewed every year and it was rewarded to each vintage. And now since 2020, the reward is reviewed every 5 years and it is awarded to the wine estates, not the vintage. So, you know, it kind of free up some time for the wine estates to actually focus more on the production instead of focus on just that vintage, and it's just too much administrative work. Anyway, what we want to know as consumer is that Cru Bourgeois is rewarded to wine estates that produce quality wine, and since 2020, it has broken down Cru Bourgeois into 3 levels. They are Cru Bourgeois Supérieur, and Cru Bourgeois Exceptionnel. And Cru Bourgeois Exceptionnel is the best. So do look out for this word on the labels, and this only apply to the Médoc left bank wines. Now, the other labeling term that you may want to pay attention to is Cru Artisan. And so we are still on the left bank, is still Médoc. This is a classification that recognizes wineries that actually manage from vineyard to barrel to bottling, and basically it is for boutique wineries of quality. There are 36 of them now. The last official journal was published in 2012, and this list gets reviewed every 5 years. Now, then we move on to right bank. Now, we always talk about left bank, and obviously we need to talk about right bank as well. And then right bank, we have Saint-Emilion classification that have A, B, and Premier Grand Cru Classé. Just to be aware of, there's Saint-Emilion Grand Cru and there's Saint-Emilion Premier Grand Cru Classé. The latter one is where the classification is. The word Grand Cru means that there's lower yield, there's some restriction on the alcohol level and also on the aging requirement. When you're looking for quality identification, is actually the word classé at the end. So what we're thinking here is that probably sometimes for everyday wine, the Premier Grand Cru Classé A and B, they may be too expensive. So you can actually look for some good value ones that are Grand Cru Classé. So without the A and B. And after all, you may want to be open to try out something less well known. Like just now, we didn't actually go into, there's a region between the left bank and right bank. It's called entre deux mers. In English, it means between two seas, and in that region, there are some good value reds as well. Also, some Emilion satellites, Côte de Bordeaux, for example. Some of these regions are less famous, so you may actually be able to find some good wines at a very good price. Just to summarize what we have discussed today, so we talk about left bank and right bank. So left bank is more Cabernet Sauvignon dominant. The soil is gravel, it helps drain the water. It is also where you can find most of the most premium wine estates, and it's also where the Bordeaux reputation is built on. This is where you find the 1855 classification of the premium wine estates that we know about today. On the right bank, the grape is mainly Merlot dominant, blend with Cabernet Franc. The soil is clay, limestone, it's different type of soil, it's colder soil, and Merlot is less tannic, so you can actually drink it earlier. Some of the bigger regions on the right bank is Pomerol and Saint-Emilion. They have their own classification as well. It's the 1955 classification that is reviewed every 10 years. We talk about the labeling terms for Bordeaux wines. For example, Grand Vin is a marketing term, it's not a classification. And then how to identify quality wines from the left bank, look for the word Cru Bourgeois and Cru Artisan. And for the right bank, if you want to look for quality wine producers, you may want to look for the word Premier Grand Cru Classique. For those that are curious about wines, you would definitely like to explore the lesser known regions like Entre deux mers, the Saint-Emilion satellites, and Côte de Bordeaux. So great jobs for you guys to watch until the end of this video. I do hope that you have learned something new today, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!